Hello, everybody, and welcome to Science for 5th grade. There's our lesson title up there, over there. Those are the materials you're going to need today for this science lesson on the Introduction to Systems. You'll need your science notebook. You made one of those a couple of weeks ago, so go grab it if you don't have it in front of you already. Or if your science notebook is on a Google Doc, then you're going to have to do a little bit of juggling back and forth between tabs, but you can make it work. And obviously, if you have a paper science notebook, you'll need something to write with. And down here, these are our I cans today. I'm going to read them out for you. It says, I can define system in the context of life science, and I can identify the components of different systems. Let's get into it. So this idea of living systems, which is going to be the focus of our work in life science for the beginning portion of 5th grade. But before we can get into what a living system is, let's think about the idea of generally what is a system. Now, you might hear the word system regularly in many sort of contexts, whether it's a video game system, which is definitely a kind of a system, or something like a system failure if everything goes down, right? So thinking about a system, and here's the start to our word wall. I'll pull us a little bit closer there. Tilt it up. Our science word wall says this: a system is a collection of interacting parts that work together to perform a role or a function. I'll read that one more time. A collection of interacting parts that work together to perform a role or a function. So essentially, a system is anything, any collection of things that while working together, they do something or perform some sort of role, okay? I've got a few examples of systems here, okay? The first example of a system I'm going to pull up is not a living system. Again, we really want to get into what is a system in general. And in order for us to think about what a system is in general, we're going to take some everyday items. These are not living items. I will preface that. These are not living items, but I think coming at it from the lens of there's systems around us and in our everyday life all the time, that can really give us a little bit of better background knowledge when we start to talk about these systems of a living thing, like ourselves, for instance. The first living system, or the first system I'm going to grab is this one. It's a little heavy. Here we go. Here is our first system. What is this? Oh my gosh, I'm going to break things here. What is this? This is, you are correct, a vacuum cleaner. Now, let's think about, going back to our word wall here, a system is a collection of interacting parts or components that work together to perform a role or a function. So, let's think about this here. What is the function of our vacuum cleaner? Yeah, exactly right. It's to suck up dust and debris, stuff on the ground, right? It's a cleaning system. It's a way for humans, and it's a man-made system. It's a way for humans to help keep from cluttering, right? And all the parts of our vacuum cleaner work together to create that system. So let's think about what are some of the components or parts of a vacuum cleaner. I'm going to go to our anchor chart here. Ta-da! So we have our system is our vacuum cleaner. the role or function is to clean, it's to suck up debris, it's to clean up spills. Okay? So now let's think of what are the components or the parts of a vacuum cleaner. You can put them in the chat. Let's see how quickly our chat responds here on a live stream. So the question is, what components or parts make up the system of a vacuum cleaner? Let's see. I'm actually kind of curious about this because I don't actually know how long the delay is between you seeing me and hearing me ask the question and me seeing your live chat comments. I wonder. Let's think about this vacuum cleaner here. I'm going to back it up just slightly. There we go. I'm going to back it up just slightly so we can get it. Things keep falling off this vacuum cleaner, which is probably not great. Okay, so we've got somebody just said it. Ava said it. Thank you. We've got our tube right? What does this do? Or we call this a vacuum hose, right? So the hose helps direct the flow of air into our vacuum area, or our vacuum cleaner, right? We've got, what else have we got? On the back, we've got a power cord, right? Our system would not work without energy. Call back to 4th grade. Hello. We've got our power cord that provides electrical energy. Okay, what other parts might we see? All the way down here on the bottom, we've got our brushes, right? We've got our little spinny vacuum brush things, right? And they spin and they sort of stir up the dust so it's easier to get sucked up. It's great on carpets, right? Are there any other parts? There's tons more parts, right? As simple as the handle. That's the component of the system. Without the handle there, it'd be a heck of a lot harder to push your vacuum cleaner around, right? So our handle, so you can, makes it easier to push vacuum around. And so on and so forth. There are many other components to a vacuum cleaner, right? There's the bag that catches all of the dust, or the bin that catches all of the dust if you have a bagless vacuum. There's the filter that makes sure that, no big stuff gets through and gets sucked into the bag, right? There's the little extender thingy if you need to get into a tight spot, right? So there are all of those components come together to make the system that is our vacuum cleaner. And if one of those parts fails or doesn't work, that changes our system, right? Some of them, right, if our hose doesn't work, our vacuum could still work, you just wouldn't have the hose available. If something like the power cord stopped working, well, that would be more of a critical system failure, and our vacuum just wouldn't turn on at all. Okay, so all of these parts work together and interact to create a whole system. Okay, let's look at one more. Again, it's not a it's not a living system in this case, but it's our ukulele. Okay, this is a system that has parts as well. Okay, thinking about what's our What's the role or the function of an ukulele? Right? The role of or function of our ukulele is to play music. To make noise or make sound. Okay? And the different components to our system, you don't have to be writing all of this down. Okay? But as you're thinking about our ukulele, you could be writing down your own notes on what components do you see here? What makes an ukulele an ukulele? Right? We've got our strings. When you play them together, right? So we've got our strings that vibrate, turn that kinetic energy into sound waves. We have the body of our ukulele. That's a component in and of itself. It is an amplifier. It makes that sound louder. If you remember from last year's science work around energy, right? Making something louder means our wave gets bigger, right? It doesn't get closer or apart or further together. The wave itself gets bigger. We have here's another component. We have our little pegs at the top that change individual strings. Okay, so with a system, that's an idea to think about, is that every system that we talk about, living or non-living, is going to have components that all work together. Okay? And on occasion, you will have this third word in our word wall here, which is a subsystem. Okay? And this says, if you can't read it, I'll read it to you. A subsystem is a system that works within a larger system. So it's kind of its own collection of interacting parts that work together to perform a role or a function, but it also exists within a larger system. A great example, and one that we here in the Bay Area are familiar with, is BART. Right? BART as a system with all of its interconnecting lines and tracks and the huge concrete pillars that hold up the tracks when they're elevated above the street, or the subway tunnels that go underneath the bay or underneath downtown San Francisco. Okay? Those are all components in that system that its function or role is to be a mode of transportation, is to be able to take hundreds of thousands of people around the Bay Area every single day. In that system of BART, of Bay Area Rapid Transit, there are subsystems. Okay? And a great example, and the easiest example of a subsystem, would be the BART trains themselves. Okay? Thinking about a BART train itself, it is a collection of interacting parts that work together to perform a role or a function. That train car, right? It's got a bunch of electrical stuff so it can be steered, and the speed can go up and down. It can speed up, slow down. It's got brakes. It's got electricity flowing through it so it can go. It's got seats that people can sit in. It's got rails that people can hold on to. It's got signs that people can read to know where they're going. It's got, I'm trying to think what else. It's got doors that can open and close so people can get in and out safely. All of those components make up the system of the BART train. And then the BART train itself is a subsystem of the whole concept or the whole thing that is BART. Okay? Without those train cars, it'd just be people running on tracks, and that's a whole different system altogether. That's called sidewalk, right? So the big takeaways here, okay, this idea of a system being that collection of interacting parts, subsystem being a system that works within a larger system, and then our component being parts of a system. Okay? Now, if we think about living systems, systems within living things, the purpose or the role or function of a living thing is to survive and stay alive, right? And we have all these subsystems and components that work together to help us do that. If you take a tree, for instance, right? The tree is a system. And it has all these parts and subsystems that work together, whether it's roots, leaves, branches, fruit, seeds, bark. All of those components work together to help the tree serve its function of surviving and making more trees, right? It also has functions to larger society, like giving off oxygen, so people or animals that breathe oxygen can live. But a tree just as itself, its function is to survive and make more trees. And it's got all its components that do that. Okay, so our task for this afternoon, there should be an exit ticket up on Google Classroom at this point. Our task is to read pages 3 and 4 in our Living Systems book, and then answer the question about them. There's a bunch of different systems up there, and it gives you the choice of pick, I think, 4 or more of them, and think about what components make up that system. We got a great question in the chat. What is the difference between subsystems and components? Great question. Subsystems, I would consider, really they're systems on their own. Whereas, a component is just a part of one system. If we let's take our ukulele again. If we take off the string, we take off the ukulele string and poke it, it's not going to make any noise. It needs the rest of the system in order to function and to do its job. Okay. Whereas a BART train, even if it's off the tracks, like its doors can still open, people can still sit in the seats, that kind of a thing. And so sort of I would consider a component just to be one part that really doesn't serve a function on its own. It needs to be part of something to serve a function. Whereas a subsystem would be something that can serve a function on its own, but also works as part of a bigger function, if that makes sense. Here's another great example. The last system I'll show you. Sorry. It's a trumpet, right? It is a system on its own because it's got all these different parts that work together to make music and to make sound. Okay, it's got the bell that amplifies it. It's got the valves that change the length of the instrument, raising or lowering the pitch. It's got the mouthpiece that creates that sound vibration that goes through. Okay, so this is a system on its own, but it can also be a subsystem if you're playing in a band, right? Then this trumpet is no longer just serving to play music, but it's working with other instruments, other subsystems, to play a symphony or to play a jazz piece, right? Or to play in a ska band or a funk band, right? So I think that's the best example of what's the difference between a component and a subsystem. Like one of the valves on my trumpet here, this is definitely a component. right? It doesn't really have a function on its own. It just is a valve. But when you put it as part of your larger system, your trumpet, then it can be used to lengthen or shorten the length of our instrument and raise and lower the pitch of our instrument. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Checking the chat, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much for your participation. I appreciate it. Exit ticket is on Google Classroom, so be sure to check that out. Writing group C, we are meeting in the Zoom room at 1:45. That's in about 8 minutes. And everybody, we will see you at 2:15 on Zoom to do our closing meeting for the day. All right, take care. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn those notifications on so you don't miss a single lesson, and we will see you next time.